คว้าโอกาสล่าอนาคตล้วงอินไซต์ The Standard Economic Forum 2023 Future Ready Thailand เศรษฐกิจไทยไล่ล่าอนาคตรวมผู้นำระดับโลกและไทยกว่า 40 คนไว้ในงานเดียวพบกับเศรษฐาทวีสินบรรทุลล่ำซำเศรษฐพุทธสุทธิวาฒนฤพุทธสุรเกียรติเสถียรไทยสุประชัยเจียรวนนท์สุภวุฒิสายเชื้อกอบศักดิ์ภูตระกูลพยงศรีวณิชคัตยาอินทรวิชัยสมโพธิ์อาหุไนธนาธรจึงรุ่งเรืองกิจฟาบริซิโอซาโคเน่พบกันวันที่ 23-25 พฤศจิกายน 2566 จัด 3 วันเต็มณศูนย์การประชุมแห่งชาติสิริกิติ์ซื้อบัตร Early Bird ราคา 2,500 บาทได้แล้ววันนี้ถึง 31 ตุลาคมเท่านั้น
I think there's something very powerful about stopping a moment in time. My main focus is on humanity, and I want to get not only a moment in history, but human moments. I want people to understand the human cost of war. If there's to be a war for any reason, it should be the last option that's even considered.
สวัสดีค่ะ Global Focus วันนี้จะพาท่านผู้ชมมาเดินดูนิทรรศการภาพถ่ายนะคะแต่เป็นภาพถ่ายจากพื้นที่สงครามและพื้นที่ความขัดแย้งจากหลายมุมของโลกถ่ายโดยช่างภาพมืออาชีพชื่อดังคุณเจมส์ นักเวย์คุณเจมส์เป็นช่างภาพสงครามชาวอเมริกันเดินทางไปทั่วโลกเพื่อที่จะสะท้อนเรื่องราวต่างๆผ่านภาพถ่ายของเขาเราจะคุยกับคุณเจมส์ค่ะว่าอะไรคือสิ่งที่เขาได้เรียนรู้จากการไปสัมผัสพื้นที่สงครามทั่วโลกและอะไรคือสิ่งที่เขาอยากจะบอกเราว่าด้วยสงครามและสันติภาพค่ะเจมส์ นักเวย์ช่างภาพสงครามชาวอเมริกันวัย 75 ปีถูกยกย่องว่าเป็นหนึ่งในช่างภาพสงครามที่ยอดเยี่ยมที่สุดในโลกจากประสบการณ์ทำงานในพื้นที่สงครามความขัดแย้งและภัยพิบัติทุกมุมโลกตลอด 4 ทศวรรษที่ผ่านมาอาทิการฆ่าล้างเผ่าพันธุ์รวันดาสงครามและวิกฤตการเมืองในอินโดนีเซียโคโซโวซูดานปาเลสไตน์ภัยพิบัติสึนามิวินาศกรรม 9/11 และกรณีล่าสุดสงครามยูเครนที่เขาเดินทางเข้าไปยังแนวหน้าของสมรภูมิเพื่อบันทึกภาพการทำลายล้างโศกนาฏกรรมและความเลวร้ายของสงคราม James, why did you want to become a photojournalist in the first place?
Well, I had no background in photography growing up. I didn't have a camera when I was a young boy. I only discovered photography after I graduated from university. But during my time at university between 1966 and 1970, America was in the midst of the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement, which were two very important events in the late 20th century. And I was very affected by the photographs of the people who were documenting those two events. When I graduated, I actually didn't know what I wanted to do, so I thought a lot about it and decided that that's what I wanted to do, because I saw the social value in making the public aware of what was going on by means of photographs. I had no reason to think I had any aptitude or talent for photography. It's just something I wanted to do, and I believed I could do it. So I taught myself. It took a few years, and eventually I guess became skilled enough to actually start working for publications.
Why not do videos? Why photographs?
I think there's something very powerful about stopping a moment in time. that allows a viewer, if you do it in an effective manner, it gives the viewer a chance to really study that moment. And there are so many details and so many relationships in any given moment if it's well seen. I thought that had a unique power, and that's what I wanted to do. There's no continuity of time. There's no sound. You just have to really focus on one moment.
Like this photo here. Can you please tell us what actually happened?
So this was in the year 2000 in the city of Ramallah in the West Bank, the occupied territories. And it was the beginning of the second Palestinian uprising. They were protesting the Israeli occupation of their territory.
And where were you when you
Well, I was right in the midst
photo?
of it. This was, you know, I don't use long lenses. I get very close to whatever is happening because I think it's important that the viewers have a sense that they're sharing the same space as the people in the photographs. And I think if you use a long lens, it compresses the space and you don't feel three-dimensional space. It becomes very flattened. So I like to get right into the midst of the action, and I shoot with, you know, kind of a 35 to 28 millimeter lenses.
So you were just standing right here then, very
Yeah,
near,
but-
just here, to take
Kind
this
of-
photo.
Yeah.
ภาพที่เจมส์บันทึกในสถานที่เสี่ยงตายเหล่านี้ปรากฏในสื่อระดับนานาชาติหลายฉบับ รวมทั้ง National Geographic และนิตยสาร Time เขามองว่าตัวเองเป็นพยานในเหตุการณ์ประวัติศาสตร์ ภาพถ่ายคือคำให้การของเขา และเป็นสิ่งที่เขาเน้นย้ำเสมอมาว่า ไม่ควรลืมสิ่งที่เกิดขึ้น และเหตุการณ์เลวร้ายจะต้องไม่เกิดซ้ำ
James, when you take photos, what is it that you want to capture in your photos?
I try and capture some significant moment that might shed some insight into whatever event I'm photographing. And particularly, I mean, this image doesn't have people in it, but my main focus is on humanity. And I want to get not only a moment in history, but human moments, so that people can make a direct connection. The people who are looking at the images, the millions of people who are seeing the magazines and newspapers, can make a human connection with the people who are in the photographs. That's my main focus.
How do you know that it's the right moment to take a photo?
It's very intuitive. You know, I photograph a lot of moments, and most of the time I'm failing. Probably more than 90% of the time I'm failing. And I just keep working through that until I feel that I've made some kind of image that might have some lasting value. But it's quite a process. It's very unpredictable. I think the chances of making a strong image in any given situation are very slim. But you just have to keep trying and have faith that if you pay attention and use all the skills you have and concentrate, sharpen your focus, that something will eventually come out of it.
Do you actually anticipate for something to happen and maybe wait a bit for it to happen?
There's an element of anticipation because if you watch how events are unfolding and how people are moving, because everything I'm photographing is moving.
Exactly.
And usually I'm moving at the same time. So it's a matter of kind of synchronizing my own movements to the movement of what's happening in the frame and paying attention.
11 กันยายน คศ 2001 วันแห่งฝันร้ายอันยากจะลืมเลือนสำหรับสหรัฐอเมริกา ผู้ก่อการร้ายก่อเหตุจี้เครื่องบินโดยสาร 4 ลำ 2 ลำพุ่งชนตึกแฝด World Trade Center ในมหานครนิวยอร์ก ลำที่ 3 พุ่งชนอาคารกระทรวงกลาโหมสหรัฐ ลำที่ 4 ถูกผู้โดยสารพยายามต่อสู้และเครื่องบินตกในทุ่งหญ้ารัฐเพนซิลเวเนียทำให้มีผู้เสียชีวิตเกือบ 3,000 คน
For this photo, you happened to be right there.
I could see from where I lived the World Trade Centers. And when I looked out my window in the morning, the South Tower was burning. That's what I saw from my window. And I had no idea what had happened. I didn't know why it was burning. But I thought that if it was an accident, it was a major accident, I better get over there and document it. So I assembled my camera equipment, and while I was doing that, my windows rattled, and I looked out the window, and the second tower was burning. And I realized immediately that we were at war, that we had been attacked by Al-Qaeda and bin Laden. Because of all the time I'd spent in Afghanistan, it just became very clear to me. So when I was deciding how to photograph it, I saw the cross, and I realized that it symbolized a cultural difference between the attackers and America. It just represented that cultural divide, which was in a way at the heart of this attack. When I began to photograph it, the building was still standing. Imagine that in the background here. And as I was photographing it, it suddenly collapsed right in front of my lens, and I just kept photographing it as it fell. You see these giant girders flying through the air. They're giant steel girders that must weigh a ton or more, and they were flying through there like matchsticks, all coming at me. You see this big piece of the side of the building.
Did you get hurt?
No, miraculously, I survived it. After I made this picture, all this stuff kind of flew over me. I found shelter, and I wasn't hit by it.
การทำงานในพื้นที่เสี่ยงภัยทำให้เจมส์ได้รับบาดเจ็บและถึงขั้นเฉียดตายมาแล้วหลายครั้ง เจมส์เคยถูกยิงที่ขาระหว่างมาถ่ายภาพความขัดแย้งทางการเมืองในไทยเมื่อปี 2014 เขายังได้รับบาดเจ็บจากแรงระเบิดในเอลซัลวาดอร์โดนยิงด้วยกระสุนปืนครกในเบรุตและถูกโจมตีด้วยระเบิดใส่ขบวนรถระหว่างทำงานในอิรัก
What was the worst or most dangerous situation that you have been?
Well, it's very, very hard to tell. I've been in many life-threatening situations, and I've had many close calls where it could have gone either way. And I've been very fortunate. I think standing next to the World Trade Center when it collapsed was about as dangerous as it can get. But I've been shot at and bombarded with missiles and bombs from airplanes and mortar shells and many different situations.
In all the conflicts or war zones that you have been to, do you get drawn into the conflict emotionally? Do you take sides, or do you always have to tell yourself, I'm just an observer?
I get deeply involved. I have very powerful emotions, virtually everything I photograph. And in understanding, by observing and understanding, I have a sense of who's on the right side, who's the aggressor, who's the victim, and I don't feel neutral at all. However, because I have, definite sympathies for one side, does not mean that I will create propaganda for them. It does not mean I will falsify facts or give a wrong caption or, create a false image. I will only photograph the facts. And if my belief is right about right and wrong of a given war, the facts will speak for themselves.
In Thailand, you had worked in Thailand before as well, and you got injured too. Can you please tell us about that?
Well, it was back at a time of intense political turmoil in the country, and there were two, very distinct factions lined up against each other. I was photographing what started out as a peaceful demonstration of one of the factions, and a group from the opposing side came around and started shooting at them. And it turned into an all-out gunfight on the streets, and I got shot through the leg.
Any serious injury after that?
Well, I was very lucky, because the bullet went in one side and out the other. It didn't hit anything major. It could have blown my foot off, but it was just lucky how it, sort of threaded the needle through my leg and didn't break a vein or break a bone. It just went through. So it healed fine.
โลกเผชิญกับความเลวร้ายของสงครามอีกครั้งเมื่อรัสเซียเปิดฉากโจมตียูเครนเดือนกุมภาพันธ์ปี 2022 และสงครามยังคงยืดเยื้อฆ่าชีวิตทหารและพลเรือนของทั้งสองฝ่ายไปนับแสนแต่ยังไร้วี่แววทางออกสู่สันติภาพ
Your most recent work was in Ukraine, the Russian and Ukraine war.
Yes.
Can you please tell us about this photo, please?
This picture was made in a suburb of Kyiv called Irpin. And the Russians had made their way right up to the edge of Kyiv and were stopped in Irpin. One of the means by which their offensive was halted was the Ukrainians destroying this bridge so they couldn't bring their vehicles across it. But the Russians were still in the town, just not too far from here. In fact, there were still snipers shooting at the bridge. I think what's significant about this picture is that you see the trauma in the citizens who have, endured this Russian invasion and are fleeing from it. And I think that human moment where he's, seeking comfort from this is a territorial defenseman. A lot of citizens mobilized to defend their country who weren't specifically in the armed forces. And they were called territorial defense. And you can see this man, just seeking comfort in his trauma, having just escaped the Russian. If you study this picture, you study his face, the look in his eye, how his hand is gripping the defenseman. And then in the background, you see other citizens being helped across the bridge.
Having first-hand experiences in all of these war zones, how do they shape your perspective about war?
Most wars seem unjust and unnecessary. And that's, I think that's the most basic thing I can say about it. People have to defend themselves. So when the Russians invaded Ukraine, of course they were defending themselves. Some things are worth fighting for. But in general, no matter the nationality, the religion, the culture, or even the cause, all wars lead to acts of inhumanity.
Do you think your photographs can help change the world one way or another?
I don't want to give my own photographs too much credit. I'm one of many photographers. I'm one of many journalists. And it's the critical mass of the information provided by all of us together every day, ongoing to inform the public that I believe does become a very important element in the process of change.
In general, what would be your message to people who come and look at your exhibition about war and peace?
I want people to understand the human cost of war. And if there's to be a war for any reason, it should be the last option that's even considered. There must be ways to avoid conflict. And I would urge people to, decision makers, to advise themselves that if they get into a war, what will happen and how difficult it will be to stop it once they start it. And so an informed population, I think, is very important to put pressure on the decision makers. They see the same pictures. They're human. They become upset by the images too. And they know that millions of their constituents are upset. And then it's their responsibility to do something about it.
Tanks were immediately deployed to these areas to help dislodge the Viet Cong.
อีกหนึ่งความโหดร้ายของสงครามคือการใช้อาวุธทำลายล้างชีวิตผู้คนอย่างไร้มนุษยธรรมอย่างกรณีการใช้ฝนเหลืองหรือสารเคมีกำจัดวัชพืชความเข้มข้นสูงของกองทัพสหรัฐในสงครามเวียดนามระหว่างปี 1961 ถึง 1971 ทำให้มีผู้ได้รับผลกระทบนับล้านเกิดปัญหาสุขภาพร้ายแรงเช่นเป็นมะเร็งเกิดปัญหาทางจิตใจและระบบประสาทและลูกเกิดมาพิการแม้สงครามจะผ่านไปนานกว่า 5 ทศวรรษแล้วก็ตาม
And this is many years after the end of the Vietnam War. And during the war, the Americans used a chemical that became known as Agent Orange. And one of the ingredients of Agent Orange is a chemical called dioxin, which is one of the most toxic chemicals known to man. One of the effects that it has is on the genetic structure of the people who ingest dioxin. And it's resulted in an inordinate amount of malformed children in every generation since the war. So it was a form of chemical warfare, not only against the enemy at the time, but against future generations. This is a picture of love, and I think you can see that the way the mother is holding her daughter, the look on her daughter's face, the look of peace, the way she's holding her arms to exercise her. And if you really pay attention to details, you see that the girl's fingertips are touching the light.
You have received so many awards. I think all the awards are available in the world. Is there anything else you want to achieve?
Actually, I've never done what I do for awards. It's not in my consciousness. These are things that happen later. And absolutely no motivation for me to win awards. It happens, and I'm grateful for the recognition. And I think it's important for the editors who, gave me the assignment. That kind of validates the assignment they gave me, and I think it's, good for them. But does not motivate me one way or another.
But is there anything else you want to do with them?
Well, just to continue my work.
You won't retire?
I have no plans to retire. I mean, I work less now these days, but because the industry has changed. So there's less work, but I still continue and want to continue it.
Now I walk around looking at all of your photos. I don't know how I should feel. I feel 90% hopeless, 10% hopeful, especially with the picture of Nelson Mandela with his fist in the air. But the rest, they're all so dark. These are the horrors of humanity. How do you actually, as a photographer, want viewers to feel or think when we look at your photos?
The first thing they should understand is that none of the people I have photographed have given up hope. They all have hope. They all wish things would change. And if they haven't given up hope, why should anyone else give up hope for them? In fact, it's the viewers who see the pictures and the power they have of public opinion that in many ways is their hope. So I urge you not to feel hopeless. Nelson Mandela had spent 27 years in prison, most of which at hard labor. And he never gave up hope. And if I had photographed him in prison and you had seen that picture, you should not have given up hope for him either, or for his cause, because he continued to fight even in prison. And when he came out after this terrible experience, after suffering a life under apartheid, which is a form of extreme racial discrimination that's been made into law, and he fought against that his whole life, he came out of those conditions with forgiveness. and his moral authority led his country to a peaceful transition to democracy. If he had given up hope, if the public had given up hope, this would never have happened. His people never gave up hope. They continued to struggle against apartheid. I think despair and hopelessness will not solve any problems. We cannot afford despair. We can only engage.
So you would urge everyone to still have hope and engage.
Yes.
นิทรรศการของคุณเจมส์ นักเวย์เป็นการร่วมมือกันนะคะระหว่างสมาคมถ่ายภาพแห่งประเทศไทยในพระบรมราชูปถัมภ์และสถานทูตสหรัฐในประเทศไทยสำหรับท่านไหนที่อยากจะมาดูก็เชิญได้นะคะที่หอศิลป์กรุงเทพตั้งแต่วันนี้จนถึง26 พฤศจิกายนนี้ฟรีค่ะโอกาสดีๆแบบนี้ไม่ได้หากันง่ายๆนะคะสวัสดีค่ะ